Yippee! All right, we are live. So we're going to talk about practice-based research projects, and if anybody is having any problems, challenges, solutions for the people who have challenges, back and forth talking. Basically, what we can do is talk about. I'm probably going to go find somewhere quiet. We're going to talk about plans for what you're going to do for your project, and then go around and figure out if anybody's having any problems with that. So I guess I'll go first. My plan for my implementation plan project idea proposal is to take the concept that I'm using with the drum corps right now and ankle dorsiflexion, range of motion, can be developed as an injury prevention screen or protocol for the track and field team at ISU.
Hey Nico, can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can.
If you want to restart that, we lost you while you were moving.
Oh no. Okay. So my plan is to utilize the weight-bearing lunge test and see if it can be turned into like a screening tool for injury in track and field athletes at ISU. So it's similar to the study that I'm doing for my DAT project with the drum corps, except I could use it similarly in the same idea, collect data on the track and field athletes, track their progress for a year, see what injuries develop, and then see what the common injuries are for track and field, and see if they can be prevented by increasing dorsiflexion range of motion in those athletes. So the ones that have higher dorsiflexion range of motion, if they get a different number of different types of injuries than the ones who don't. And so I guess that's kind of like my thing. Do you guys want to like talk through each subject and then go into like challenges of people and then talk about that, or do you want to like do one person at a time and then talk through challenges and stuff?
I think probably focusing on one person at a time might be a little bit easier for us to all kind of stay on track.
Okay. I only have a couple things that I'm kind of running into in terms of like how I want to write up this paper. I don't know the difference between specific aims and goals. So when we have to write the section on specific aims, my goal and purpose is to see if the weight-bearing lunge can be used to track injury rate. So if I can determine if I can decrease or increase injury by seeing if there's a certain number or the certain average of the people who get hurt, what their dorsiflexion range of motion is, that's my goal. So what are my aims? Is it like the process of how I do it, or is that like my, I don't know how I'm supposed to write that part. You guys...
My understanding is that it's more the process of what you're doing and how you're going to accomplish it. So your goal is to track dorsiflexion, but you're going to do that by implementing the standing lunge. So you're kind of mixing your goals and how you're going to accomplish them.
So like procedures?
Say that again?
Like procedures?
Yeah, kind of. That, I mean, that's my understanding of it. If someone else has a different understanding, it'd be a good idea to speak up.
Nope.
I don't. I was going to ask that same question.
Well, yeah, because with the way it's written, I didn't really follow on how it's different from what I already wrote above, except this time it's in number form instead of paragraph form. So I guess my other question would be, when I get to the point of writing the significance, it's basically like what I already wrote before, but just in more depth. So I already talked about the purpose of the project is to do this, but then the significance would be why it's good for the team and possibly the world and how it can affect other athletic trainers. Like, is that what I'm going for, or is it just like the point of it is kind of like what I already said, just reworded into significance instead of purpose?
I think if you focus more localized, so you start out in terms of your paper, if you talk more about what you're doing at the drum corps, correct? The drum corps? Is that okay? If you talk about what you're doing at the drum corps, and then you say, my specific aim is to test this and test the dorsiflexion, the weight-bearing lunge with the drum corps to do X, Y, and Z, and your significance, you say, through my clinical practice, I also work in Indiana State University with a track and field cross-country team totaling 200 athletes. If in this smaller population we determine XYZ from this, this can be translated into this population, which has a more wide-reaching impact, which could then later be adapted by athletic training at ISU in general and possibly spread. So if you start localized, that'll give you more, I guess, ways to write it without repeating yourself.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just running into that problem. I felt like I was just talking in circles when I got to that point. So then, like the concept of innovation is like my method section? Or is it more, how is this going to change the clinical setting? Or both?
It sounds like both.
Okay.
Because it's so like if you go through it, it's see how it seeks to shift current clinical practice paradigms. So that's kind of how it's going to implement your clinical change your clinical practice. Those kinds of things. What potential could come out of it, but then it also says any approaches or methodologies or things that you're going to use.
But I feel like we do that in the approach section.
I know. I think it's probably taking that information and then applying it to what you think it'll do, basically.
So
long
term. Like what we said. Yeah, up here briefly. The specific objectives to change an existing paradigm in clinical practice. So like a more in-depth version of the specific aims.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just feel like this is really all drawn out, but
yeah, it's a lot of repeating.
Yeah. I think that's it, because the last part is pretty much like what'd you do and the point of it all. So, and we're talking about the problems now, but I guess the problems wouldn't really come up until I actually do it, which since I've done it before, I could talk about possible problems, what could happen with the track and field team and implementation, number of athletes, that type of thing. So
yeah.
Cool. Yep. So I'm good. Well, that makes more sense now.
Oh my goodness. Does anybody else want to go next?
All you, girl.
Me? Okay. Well, first I was looking up. This doesn't have to be. Does this have to be implemented this summer, or are we coming up with the plan? I haven't looked into the long term. What?
This is just the idea. So this is like.
Right. So the idea is just this summer, and then it's theoretically something we'd be doing like starting in the fall or something.
I'm already doing a PBR, so I don't know if I'm going to do this too.
Okay, so it's really just
Unless
the idea.
we have to.
Yeah, so it's an idea, because not all of us are practicing clinically right now.
Okay, because I came up with this whole thing, and then it just occurred to me that might be an issue. Okay, so mine is basically my overall thing is, does patient satisfaction and quality and care improve with appointment-based style rehabs, basically? So in my current clinical setting, I mean, being the only clinician there, and it's kind of made it like this last year, rehabs got really, really busy at sometimes, and I felt like I couldn't manage all of them, or I felt like there were days where there were athletes who were in there way longer than they needed to be simply because I was trying to juggle so many rehabs and things like that. So I'm kind of wanting this coming semester, to try and implement having like my longer term, not necessarily longer term, but something that I'm actually going to be dealing with for like a week or two or longer than that, actually schedule time to come in. So that's what I wanted to do basically, and so I would just basically measure patient satisfaction with those situations. So I think my design, which I might be one of my questions on it, is I originally was thinking I would do like a pre-test and a multiple post-test assessment. So like do the patient satisfaction survey in the very beginning, and then switch to basically doing the appointment-based things, and then afterwards every like week or 2 weeks what their satisfaction is with switching to an appointment time, so that I at least have like 2 or 3 athletes at one time, and then they get in and out quicker and they don't spend as much time away from practice, and then seeing if they feel that I'm more focused on them, if they feel like they're able to do more and are more efficient, those kinds of things.
Are you going to have a number that you like or want to hit?
Like total? I haven't looked into that yet. Probably. That was one of kind of my barriers that I didn't know. Like, obviously, each injury isn't going to take the same amount of time to come in and rehab for, so then I'm going to have a varying number of, like, post-assessments. I didn't know if that would end up being an issue or not.
How would you compare the scheduled to the opposite?
Like having like a control of somebody who doesn't do appointments?
And like this is practice-based research, so it doesn't need to be set up super well, but I'm thinking that because you can measure like positive or negative patient outcomes very easily through PROMs.
Yeah.
But if you were to maybe go to your supervisor and say, hey, can we push practices back 30 minutes because this is the satisfaction I'm getting for patients who are for appointments. These are the outcomes. How could you show him that works better as opposed to something else? Would it be maybe athletes who have had injuries in the past that you know of that were treated under the old system where you're doing 3 people at once and then maybe...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Coming in with kind of like the rationale behind doing it. Is that what you're asking?
More the control thing. The control. Like how do you can measure the patient satisfaction in this, but if your goal is to say, is scheduling appointments better for patient satisfaction?
Yeah, no, you're good. That's one of the things I was thinking is, do you think it would make sense for that purpose, having athletes, if they happen to get injured again, basically, doing like a based on last year and their previous experience with me versus now their new experience?
I think that's a good idea. You can compare it to the past and say, do you think this is more efficient than the past? And then you don't really have to worry about having the control, because with practice-based, you're doing it like with what you're changing. So
right.
Like me not having a control, I would do the ones who I wouldn't measure and the ones that I would measure, and then tell them, hey, this is what you need to do, fix it. Like I'm just collecting it and seeing what needs to be fixed. And you already know it needs to be fixed, so you're fixing it and seeing it better. So
I was worried about, because that was something I thought about, but I was worried then that I'm very limited to the potential number of people that I'll be working with then, because, I'm just basically waiting for someone who got injured last year to get injured again this coming year.
Which, I mean, if your population, let's say you only go to a high school that has 20 athletes and you're wanting to do a PBR, you still want to do a PBR.
Yeah.
So I don't think your numbers should matter. only if you know what it possibly could be. You know, like you have 500 athletes, so maybe you have a goal of seeing at least 100.
Yeah.
You can have a goal, but you don't really have to meet it. There isn't like a power
Right.
you have. You're just trying to make a good change.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that you could potentially do, and feel free to anyone strike this down, but I'm thinking if you found some sort of problem that was specifically measured like patient satisfaction based on time spent, maybe something like clinician engagement, and for the fall semester, if you just did that with anyone that got injured, then maybe you could say, hey, Caroline, over at Terre Haute North, if you're in the opposite one where maybe you're dealing with 2 or 3 patients at a time, could you have them fill out the same thing and see if there's a difference in patient? I mean, that almost defeats the purpose of your own practice-based research, but I don't know. That's the thought.
You could. I like that idea. You could not change your practice for fall semester and track everything, and then change it spring semester and use the same patient-rated outcome measure and then compare between the two.
Yeah.
So even if it's not the same patients,
do you think I have to do a full semester or do you think I could like split the semester in half and...
I think you could almost do like number of injuries too.
Yeah, like once I hit a certain number of them, then I switch to doing the appointment based.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like football, so I'd have football, volleyball, and cross country in the fall, which all of that's starting like they start school the first week of August. So August all the way through like November, basically. I have all that time. That could potentially work if I hit like a number of injuries. That might work. Does that seem like a good idea?
I like that revised.
Because then I can.
I don't know if that's what they would like, but.
Yeah, and if they don't, then I mean I could do like what you're saying, Caroline, doing this semester, and then that'd give me plenty of time to collect as much as I possibly can and probably have a little bit more information. That's true. Okay. Yeah, and I like the clinician engagement idea. I think that would be... Do you think that would be better, like, along with a patient, like a general patient satisfaction with their care? Like alongside with both of them, or one versus the other?
I think
both.
Go ahead.
Because then in one specifically asking about me and their time with me, like our interaction, am I better basically with them one-on-one, and then also overall treatment, which or their perception of it. Yeah, I like that. Thanks, guys.
Damn. Okay, I can go. So, and I haven't decided how full bore I want to go with this one. So, with basketball, as you guys probably know, one of the big things is your vertical. So, players always want to increase their vertical. They want to make sure their vertical is as high as they can get it. They're getting the most out of their bodies. But unfortunately, players get injured, and for whatever reason, whether it's biomechanical or maybe even psychological, their vertical decreases. So through my actual research, I have a jump platform, and we've created the triple hop for distance laid out in the lab. So what I've done is I've actually already taken a baseline vertical jump measurement for all my players, as well as the triple hop for distance. Now, as it stands right now, I have 2 long-term rehabs that have technically reached their conclusion. I'm no longer treating them for their injury, and I'm purely in that performance stage. So for them, I've actually been measuring their vertical jump a little bit longer. So for my practice-based research, which I'm actually going to be starting, assuming everything works out, about halfway through June, is I'm going to create what I would consider an optimized lower extremity strength and power program with a focus on vertical jump. So I'm going to dive into the literature, I'm going to go and look at some biomechanics, and I'm going to design a program that can be done in 30 minutes or less that an athlete can do 3 times a week with or without me. And then I'm going to track these long-term injuries throughout the course of the summer and see their improvement through the vertical jump. Now, I do have the records for all the other players on the team, but I'm not trying to be super ambitious and do this with the whole team because there's no way that would possibly happen. I just know that these 2 long-terms are used to seeing me every day, so if I tell them 3 times a week, they'll do it. So I guess I kind of run into that same problem too. I don't know if I have a control, like, as we talk about, like a control, nothing to compare to, but I don't know if I need it. What do you guys think?
I don't think you need one, honestly. That's something that I kind of do in my own practice. If I have a new technique or whatever, I'll pick a patient or 2, try it with them, see if it works, and if it does, then I'll use it with more athletes. So I think that if you start it with these 2 patients and you feel like it's working, then that's when you could branch out and see about implementing it with every ankle sprain that you have, or every meniscus tear, or like whatever pathologies you're looking at. At that point, I think is when you could begin branching out and using more patients.
So do you guys see it? And this is where I'm not sure. So these long-term injuries are completely different. One was a open tib fib fracture, and they're about a year and 6 months out. And the other one is an Achilles tendon rupture, who's 11 months out. So completely different, but I want to use the same protocol on them. So I'm really I'm like kind of broaching that line into like the strength and conditioning human performance side. What do you guys think about that? I'm perfectly fine with that, but do you feel like that's almost a dead? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at just general jump, I don't think it matters what the injury was. Because if you're looking at the concept of they got hurt, and can I make it better? Can we practice this? Focus on like maybe the psychological part too. It shouldn't matter how they get hurt, just the fact that they are hurt. So it's kind of like the idea of when you have an ankle sprain, how do you know it's ATF unless you get an MRI? If you're doing a study on ankle sprains, is it a grade 1? Is it a grade 2? Is it ATF and CF? Is it just CF? It's an ankle sprain. Even it's in the same general area, or is it a high ankle sprain? It shouldn't matter. The goal is to treat and see if it works. So I don't think the concept of the 2 different injuries matters much.
Rachel, you look like you're thinking about something.
I know, I'm trying to think. Like, I agree. I don't think it really matters. I think it could probably be a little bit beneficial for you as far as, like, in writing, like, the, what is it, the implications or something, or which part of it? Like, the significance section, basically, of where, okay, you're going to implement this with 2 completely different injuries, and hopefully, see, and you've already seen progress with this, but see progress with both of these to show that it works for at least 2 different types of injuries. And, I mean, they're specifically basketball athletes, too, so you have that in common.
I think that's the key. I think that's the major key. Like,
basketball.
You're talking about basketball at Indiana State and injuries and using vertical jump. That's your tool.
Yeah.
That's your goal. Kind of like mine. I'm not really focusing on like MTSS or anything specific. I'm just saying lower extremity injury, is there a way to prevent it by increasing dorsiflexion? Or is there a way to say your dorsiflexion isn't where it should be, or what is the measure that should be for this population? Right. Well, then you could say the same thing. What is their vertical jump? What is it supposed to be? Or get it back to what it was, and what methods are best.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
No problem.
Caroline.
So what I am currently working on is a injury prevention implementation plan. My goal is to implement it with the boys basketball team and track injuries, and then I'm also going to try to track their compliance and then any barriers I have with it. And again, this is what I explained 2 weeks ago in our last video chat. But I'm going to use the FIFA 11 Plus, and I already have coach buy-in, but where I'm getting stuck is the fact that I'm home for the summer. I'm not going to be back at North until August, and then at that point I'll be with the boys and girls soccer team. So I need to actually work out a plan with the coach at some point during the fall so we're ready to go when basketball season starts. So that's one of the barriers I have right now. But the other thing that I'm kind of stuck on is how I'm going to track compliance or patient satisfaction or something, because one of the major themes with any type of preventative care is the patient compliance or the athlete compliance. So I wanted to be able to track that to be able to determine if it's an issue and if it is, how I can address it.
Is the actual doing the prevention program, is that something that you're teaching them and then teams doing on their own, or are they supposed to be doing it each person individually, or?
The plan is to do a training session with at least the head coach, maybe other coaches as well, and then to start at least, I'm going to be the one implementing it with them prior to practice. So, and that's the other thing I need to figure out, if it's going to be before every single practice, if it's going to be 3 days a week, if we can do a modified version for game days. But my goal is to stay involved with the actual implementation of it, so that way I can correct any poor form, and make suggestions where I need to.
So then the patient compliance, wouldn't you pretty much know it if you're the one doing it?
Ideally, yes, but do I count poor compliance as players complaining about doing it or not showing up for it? Or so that's what I guess I'm trying to figure out, is where do I draw the line of compliance?
I would almost just say don't even do it at the player level, do it at the coach level.
That's what I was thinking. Try and get on board with him to make it mandatory.
Yeah, so if it becomes mandatory, how long does it stay mandatory? Does the coach like it and does it the whole season, or is it because we all know how basketball coaches can be at any level. Is it like a fad that they do for 2 weeks, and then as soon as they lose a game and wants to focus on blocking out, the first thing as soon as the guys get in the gym, they're doing blockouts, and they totally forget about it. So I would almost do it that way, because obviously as an athletic trainer, you can't be like, whoa, we can't start practice, we need to do the FIFA 11. It's going to be kind of on the coaches a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would almost do it in that. Like, are the coaches compliant? Are the coaches bought in? Are the coaches wanting to do this?
And how... Oh, sorry, Sean, I cut you off. Go for it.
No, you didn't.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking, like, how good is your relationship with the coach and your communication with him?
During season, it's fairly decent. Out of season, it's not good at all.
Okay.
And that's just because it's out of sight, out of mind.
Right. I would say, one, and as far as, like, coming up with the plan for implementing this and talking with him, talk to Greg, right? Yeah. Talk to Greg and maybe get his email address and email him over the summer and try and get the ball rolling now so that you have an idea rather than just showing up in fall. And who knows, maybe you won't get anywhere with that, but at least it's somewhere to start.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, if the coach ends up being pretty on board with this, maybe get him to commit to a certain number of weeks that he will commit to doing this with you, with the team. So then, like Sean was saying, they get to a certain point in the season and they stop, they don't want to do it anymore. At least you can sit there and at the beginning of the season, you guys have committed to maybe whatever number of weeks or a number of times during the week, something like that.
I think too, if going back to your original point, you talk about the players. What you could do is you could find some sort of outcome measure that measures like value of time spent. So if you wanted to go that route, you could give that outcome measure to the players after 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and see if they feel like the FIFA 11, modified FIFA 11, is worth their time. If they notice any difference in flexibility or warm up or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I like the idea of trying to get the coach to commit to a certain number of practices or number of weeks. Because my original thought was trying to get him to do it at least twice a week. So start out at a manageable number.
Yeah.
And then I also really wanted to emphasize my involvement in it, so that way it's not something that he feels obligated that he has to know exactly how to do.
Which he's much more likely to be on board with it if it's something that he doesn't have to manage.
Right.
Do you guys start practice right after school, or do you do like a night practice?
Normally right after school. The freshman team does an evening practice, so that would be easier to do with them because they could come in earlier. But normally school gets out at 3:15 and practice normally starts by 3:45, 3:50. So there's not much time.
Yeah. And are you doing this with varsity and JV, or?
That's something else I need to figure out. Ideally, yes. I'd love to do it with everyone, so that way I can compare injuries between this season and the previous season.
Yeah.
Right. I think the feasibility part is going to be your main issue of like how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, making sure you get the compliance. I think the concept is great.
Yeah.
It's just how you can make it, how you can actually get the information you want and make sure it's legitimate. You know, that's going to be the hard part,
right.
Which in terms of like a barrier and solution, I think like what we said, the coach is going to be your best bet, and then if the coach changes things, you kind of tell them, hey, like, this is what the research says, like, we should probably keep doing this, you know, even if something happened, don't be superstitious, you know. If you have a good relationship with your coach, you should hopefully be good to go.
Is this something that has to be done, like, right before practice, or is this something, like, I don't know if they all have, like, a P or, you know, like a physical education class or something they take during the day. Is this something they could do even during that?
Potentially, yes.
You wouldn't be there to monitor it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's designed to take the place of their warm-up.
Yeah.
So if they have a 10-minute warm-up, on the days we do this program, they don't need to do that warm-up because they should be ready to go afterwards.
See, and with that, I feel like if the coach is going to buy into this at all, he's probably going to want to buy into doing this every day. Coaches like to have their routine constantly, and once they get something, they stick with it. So I feel like wanting to do this just twice a day, or sorry, not twice a day, twice a week, if they're gonna do it, I feel like they're gonna want to do it every day, or else they're not gonna really buy in at all, I feel like. And if that's the case, I mean, that would be nice if you could at least monitor it twice a week, and hopefully they keep doing it constantly, you know. That might also be something you want to bring up to the coach if you talk about discussing how many weeks he could commit to doing this. Maybe bring up the idea of doing it every single day and buying into it for a certain number of weeks continually.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other last-minute comments before we end up the call?
Nope, I think we're good. If I have any other questions, I'll contact you guys and kind of follow up with what we talked about.
Sounds good.
Great.
Well, everyone have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for chatting.
Bye.